Thanks, Alex, for the invitation. It's a great opportunity to share the lessons learned along the way of adventures like Dataiku. And back a few weeks ago when Alex was asking me which company of the portfolio of Alven was the fastest growing right now, there was no hesitation mentioning Florian and Dataiku. And one of the reasons why it's fastest growing is that it very methodically cracked becoming an American company and cracking the American market. And we wanted to share this experience. And before we get there, maybe the right way of starting this would be to explain a bit the background of the company, what you do, how you got there, the few milestones that were important.
Yes, sure. Oh, is my mic working? Yes. So I'm Florian, the CEO. Is Raffi, the investors, so that we are sure of it. And so to give you a little background, so Dataiku is a software company. So we actually do sell software on-premise to mostly large enterprise. And the software is a collaborative platform for data science. So basically, it's a productivity platform for teams doing data in large organizations. And the kind of belief we have is that when you want to do like data science and build like artificial intelligence applications within large organizations, you can just do it by having like lots and lots and lots of data scientists, just because you don't have like enough data scientists. Plus, you actually need to infuse some business know-how in those applications. So you actually need to make analysts, business people, and data scientists, and also engineers work together and collaborate in a new way. And basically, the platform we're building is this new way of collaborating. So it's kind of similar to what CRM is to sales team, where it's actually not just about account exec, but like account exec, but more importantly, all the people around the account execs, but for data teams. And so as company, we are 5 years old, 5 years and a half, so still young enough to count half years. And we are today 150 people with people in Paris, London, and New York.
And just to retrace a bit the full story, when Alven invested in 2015, early 2015, you guys were around 15 people, 100% French revenue. Can you explain the few milestones until then and now?
Yes, sure. So we actually kind of bootstrapped the company in the first 2 years. First year, so we started 2013. First year, we built a product. 2014, we started to sell mostly in France, actually. And then we got an investment from Alven early 2015. And so that's kind of when we actually started to shift the company to the US. With the goal at the end of the day to do half of the business in the US and half of the business in Europe. And so the first stage was really about exploring the US market. So I wouldn't say our go-to-market was very methodological, meaning it was more like, let's try to get there first approach. But I think that every story is different. Ours, was specific because first we are selling software on-premise, so it's not cloud. We are targeting mostly large organizations. We don't possibly target startups, so there is no point getting to the Bay Area, possibly. And for lots of reasons, funders could not go quickly to the US, so we had to build operations with no funder on US soils. And we also were in a market which was, at least back then, kind of an early adopter niche market, meaning where people were from organizations were actually trying to reach out to us, meaning we had actually inbound. We had not to actually build kind of an outbound go-to-market capability in the US. So those constraints were, I think, quite specific back then. If I had other constraints, like you need to do outbound and you can move to the US and blah, and blah, and blah, possibly you get to other decisions, obviously. And so our first go-to-market to the US was actually basically 3 people, and actually 2 of them were in Paris. We had someone doing marketing, someone doing sales, and kind of a sales engineering / support guy in New York. That was the US team back then. Pretty small. And so, funnily enough, actually more or less all of them were native English speaker, but also native French speaker. Wow. I managed to find 3 of those. And it was really, really helpful just because, why the hell would you work in a French company if you're an American guy, talented, if you are not like some acquaintance to it, like French. So the reason why we needed those 3 people is that, well, I think you need to find the gap between what your product is and the market. In our case, because it was a pretty technical product, I guess that the product fit itself was kind of good, meaning people getting to use the product, understanding why we build it this way, and so on. But we also needed to basically have a decent website in real English, not French English, which are actually 2 different languages, where you've got like, in French English, you've got like very subtle different words that English speakers don't really understand, like, well, that's interesting, or quirky. Yeah. So we need like a native English speaker to actually write a decent website. We needed a native English speaking salesman, and actually an American salesman, which is actually different. We needed someone to actually culturally fit with the buyer in order to actually get into the sales process, just because the way we do sales process in France and in the US are very different, but it's just, you cannot really explain it. It's just culturally speaking, you don't engage with customer exactly the same way. So especially when you start selling to Fortune 100 companies, and actually our first customer there was a Fortune 100 company, you can't just do it, I think, that easily with someone coming from a pure French culture. And obviously, we needed a sales guy. So the basic setup was like those 3 people and getting the first like 1, 2, 3 customer to the US. And basically, what it helped because, well, first we were more confident in ourselves, just because we had customer in the US, so actual product market fit in the US. It was not obvious before that it was doable. And second, it also helped because getting this traction in the US managed to help us to actually, well, just be able to do a Series A with US investors, which actually help us grow to the second phase of our...
Yeah, I guess it brings us to the second phase of what you call camping, before the settlement phase. But before we switch to this, what would be the lessons learned from this first phase? And I remember we had pretty long conversations on what was happening there, and you discovered a totally new world. So what should people remember on this first discovery phase?
Well, on this first discovery phase, I think it's important to have like a very highly talented small team that can just get into the US market. And so they don't necessarily need to be like localized, all of them in the US. They just need to get those things done. And you really need to be able to kind of follow what they are doing very, 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 very closely and get hands-on on it. But I think from our perspective, things actually started to be more interesting when we get into this camping phase, because that's, at least for us, when things started to get more bumpy, in a sense. Because, well, second stage is that we actually started to hire a team in the US before we did the Series A, let's say, something like that. And so the thing is that you've got a huge recruitment bias, which is that people that actually are candidates to being employed at your company are possibly not coming for the right reason. Meaning, why the hell would you work, again, for a French company if you are in the US? You can work for lots and lots and lots of US startups. So if you do, possibly just that you end up here by chance. So meaning that building a strong team at the beginning is very difficult. So our second phase was a phase of camping where we set up this small office space. We ended up learning hard truths about how to set up a proper, compensation plan in the US. Meaning, for instance, at the very beginning, I was not really believing this amount you had to pay in the US to get good people. I kept upgrading the compensation by 20% every month until it actually doubled from the amount I was ready to pay at the beginning. Just because I was not ready to acknowledge the fact that, salaries possibly in the US and France can be multiplied by 2 or 3 for the same people, just because the rate of living is different and the market is different, and that's the hard truth. And you have to just understand it. And also you have to set up a proper compensation plans, like just because it's like healthcare and 401 and like lots of crazy stuff. And where you are small scale, you don't have like financial people to help you, and getting like the right people is very, very hard too for that. So it was lots of logistics kind of stuff. And then what helped us get like out of this phase is, well, getting a Series A with a US investor, being able to invest more money, and kind of get to the next phase where we could like set up things properly.
So, don't know if you want to switch to last phase right now or want to further explore this, but I think what struck me back then is that you were coming back from the US and you were saying that interviewing people was like interviewing people for the first time in your company again. You were restarting the whole stuff. And I think what struck me back then was that you had to kind of reshape the whole pitch of what Dataiku was, what you guys were doing. Can you tell more about that?
Yeah, in terms of lessons you can learn at this stage is that recruitment in Europe and US is different because of this bias, but also because of the local culture, meaning that you are expected to sell the company a lot at the beginning of a recruitment process. And so one mistake I made, I think, was not to hire a recruiter, like a proper US recruiter, quickly enough. So we were doing lots of things by ourselves, which was, well, kind of also helpful because we were really understanding what was happening. But yeah, you have to sell the company a lot, and that's hard because it's just a different way to proceed. And a second aspect is that you do have to be ready to get back to step one, get back to zero. It did happen to us. Like just the year where we did the Series A, at some point, in fact, like just after the Series A. So it was 2016. Yeah. Yeah.
And you were already 50 people in Paris, I think.
Yeah, we were 50 people in Paris, and maybe a dozen or less in the US. Maybe not, like maybe 8. In fact, we were doing the Series A, and at the same time, well, when you were doing a Series A in the US, in our case, we had to flip the company, meaning change the company from a French company to a US company, which was kind of a big deal, and lots of lawyering and so on. So kind of complex. And at the same time, from an operational perspective, we kind of had to reset the sales team to 0 in the US, back to 0 people doing actual sales in the US. You have to fire, you end up firing one sales, then the head of sales, then consequently all people under them, and then, well, you just have to do back your results, but having like actually no people in the team. And you have to be ready for that, meaning I heard this story like, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 times already. When you get to the US, especially doing enterprise sales, you need to be ready to do that.
Okay. And then after this Series A fundraising, you flipped to this settlement phase in a way, and then fully operating a US team and growing in the US massively. Can you explain a bit what happened then?
Yeah, we starting then, we were kind of able to, I would say, properly build a team, and in a sense, in a way that was like more comparable to the way we were building the team in France, like setting up a proper office space, moving people around from France to the US, but like just not like 1 or 2, but like more 3, 4. So you've got expat package and stuff like that to set up so that you can move people around easily. And also what helped there is that the fact that we had properly did a Series A in the US, that we were a proper US company with proper US stock options, like small details, that we were in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, so properly recognized on the market, that we had like US logos on the website. It made it possible for us to just hire US salespeople. Meaning, well, if you take the perspective of someone doing customer-facing activities in the US, whatever the position, account executive, sales engineering, and so on, if you're kind of good at your job, and especially in like hype domains like data science, artificial intelligence, and so on, well, your choice in life is either, well, you can go and work for a startup, well, you can first build your own startup, possibly, that's a decent choice, or you can go work for lots of different startups, or you can go work for large corporations like IBM, Oracle, and so on, and they pay very good salaries. Meaning a compound would be like 3, 4, meaning you have a 2, 3, 4 digit at the beginning of your overall OTE. That's the kind of number you make. So in a sense, the salary is not enough. What you want is actually to be successful and be in a company where you can actually just make it. And so you need actually it's a bet. You make a bet as a future employee, and so you try to assess the quality of the company. And so people would look at the website, would look at the logos, would look at Gartner and so on, and they need to feel this confidence before they can actually apply. And that's when you actually start finding good employees, when you build this kind of trust with the market.
And doing that, it took you probably a year and a half to build the team as is today. I think you're 50 to 70 people in New York right now, more?
Not quite according to the right number, so maybe according to the police. 60, but the real numbers are I think 30 people in New York and 40 people in the US total. So the way we are set up today is, I think, pretty usual. We've got like a headquarters in New York where you've got go-to-market, sales support, and people serving mostly the East Coast. And we also have like field sales scattered around the country. The reason why we chose New York was, well, from first practicality, like easier in terms of time zone management, and also that's where we actually had our first customers.
And maybe one last topic before we take a few questions from the audience, but another thing that struck me along the way in this adventure is the methodology that you managed to export to the US on the sales side. Marc Batty, one of your co-founders, is probably one of the persons that's more knowledgeable about the processes of customer-centric selling, who implemented that in Paris first and now lives in New York. Can you explain a bit his role in being able to structure the processes in the organization on the sales side?
Yeah, well, first you have to understand that we are kind of an engineering-minded organization, which makes sense because we kind of sell to engineers, so it's okay. So, well, we applied this kind of selling technique called customer-centric selling very extensively. Like we just, well, when you don't know about something, you just learn about it very quickly sometimes, and you just try to follow the rule, and sometimes you get pretty decent results this way. So it was just about like having any new recruit getting trained to the process and trying to follow it thoroughly and so on. And the thing is that that's, I guess, something you don't have to do when you do kind of small-scale things first. But if you get to do it at the beginning, it's just like an accelerator for scale. Just because you can apply in a consistent manner the same paradigm globally within the organization. And it gets down to small details, like you can actually forecast your sales in the US the same way you do in Europe. You can train people the same way. You can share actual sales material because you would have like the same step in the sales process. So Marc, in terms of building this process, actually helped us to kind of build this sales team in the US and just run it, or like have people coordinate in a sane manner.
Understood. Maybe before the questions display on the screen, one last question until we get there. Do you consider yourself a French company or an American company? And how do you manage company culture between two countries like that?
So generally speaking, when I'm getting asked this question, my answer can depend on the context. And contextual awareness is very important. Huh? That's, I'm sure there are lots of startup books about contextual awareness. So. But this is a multicultural company. But at the end, you end up building a global company. You need to be a US company in a sense because, well, most successful software companies are US. So because I'm a statistician, I would say that, well. But you cannot really hide completely that you are a French company. Well, actually, you can. Yeah, some of our customers, and I'm like talking about like, imagine a big Fortune 100 company based somewhere in central US, after 3 months, after we signed the subscription, would say, that's funny, because I don't quite understand why I end up speaking with so many French people in this organization. Do you have some French roots? I was like, oh, we did a good job in terms of marketing. Yeah, that was...
Great, thanks. Let's switch to the questions. We still have a few minutes, I think. Any questions from the room that are displaying? I think there are quite a few VCs in the room, so there might be VC questions as well. You know?
Well, I can talk about the actual next step in terms of like what we are doing today. It's more like building a settlement, meaning once you've got lots of questions already.
Pick the one you want.
When you go to the US, do you think you can hire externally, or do you always send your best salesperson, co-founder there? Oh, hire externally in the sense of, yes, I think you can hire externally because that's what we did. That's what we did at the end, meaning after 1 year and a half. Today, the people that do sales are people that we hired externally, but just they came for the right reason, and we were able to pick people on the market that knew the field enough and so on. But it took us a while, I guess. Why you choose US instead of another European country like UK? Well, I like UK a lot, but if you do big data, US is probably a market like 20 times bigger and with 1 year or 2 years in advance compared to the UK in terms of maturity and the size of the team and so on. So it was more rational to go to the US. And
the ecosystem is there anyway. The partners, the customers, everyone's there.
Yeah, especially the customers, because in my perspective, at least in my business, building lots and lots of traction with partners takes time because, again, it's a matter of trust. You need to be big enough on the market so that you can attract the right partners, like more like not a 100 million company, but like half of this size. So it's really about finding the first big customers in the beginning.
Next question, I guess it's about Mark. How do you find a good salesperson? That's the one you mentioned when you have a small company. And Mark is one of the co-founders, actually. And I got to say, it's one of the rare, it's a rare profile, to be honest. Among the companies, we have 50-ish companies in portfolio. Someone as educated as this into processing sales is relatively rare. I don't know if you want to add something there.
In the beginning, we made I think it was about Mark, but also all the people we hired. Well, lots of people we hired after that were that we hired lots of process-focused salespeople. And in fact, most of them were not salespeople. So Mark is not a salespeople. In fact, he's not a sales guy. He's like very process-focused, and he just knows his way around lots of things, and so you can apply it to sales. Just because you get someone smart and devoted that can say yes when you need to say yes and no when you need to say no, which is a lot about what sales is about, you can do it. And our first American hires were actually more like consultants that were doing sales because they were going into the startup world, and that's one way they could apply their skills in the startup world, but not like the typical software salesperson.
Next one. Are the sales cycles much shorter?
Yeah. I would say that generally speaking, yes. Probably, I think that for comparable markets, they could be 20-30% shorter, but not like it's not a factor 2 or a factor 3. Just like you can have bigger deals still in a pretty decent 3, 4, 5 months time frame. Then you have also another bias, which is that in the US, you could engage with very large organizations like financial institutions and so on that actually have 12, 18 months sales cycle, same as in Europe. So here you don't have a difference. But obviously, at least in our markets, the average basket size in the US would be bigger than in Europe by a factor 2 at least. But yeah, you have to multiply everything by 2 anyway, even the size of the cars.
And there's a topic that keeps coming back on these questions, and I would guess it would be: do the American buyers buy for different reasons than the European buyers? Do you end up selling for different reasons and for different purposes, or not?
Yes, yes. I would say mostly yes, but it's not a matter of culture. I would say in our domain, more a matter of a maturity of the market or size of the teams. Meaning, we are selling a collaborative platform. So if you have a team of like 20, 50, or 100 people, you really buy it for pure collaboration and scalability of your team, just because it's you start having questions like, what do I do when a data scientist is leaving the team? How can I make sure that his work is still available for the others? You know, these kind of varied questions, which are not the same. You don't have possibly the same question. You've got a team of 2 or 5 or 10 people. And so just because of size of the organizations and market maturity, we do have more smaller teams in the Europe, generally speaking, and bigger team in the US.
Let's take the 2 last ones. And there was at least one who was brave enough to identify himself in the question. That's cool. So if you're a French company going to the US and raising money, should you flip? That's a good one.
That's a good one. Well, I think I guess back 2 or 3 years ago, I would say that if you flipped, you had access to a market in the US, which was probably 2 or 3 times bigger in terms of VC firms that were willing to put money in your company. Maybe this changed quite a bit, but I still think that if you don't flip, meaning you've got a French company, you restrict yourself, and the kind of broader thinking is, at the end of the day, when you start a Series A, well, that's something I actually discovered in the US. When you start a Series A, it's become about the Series B, and when you start to do a Series B, it's about like about the Series C and so on, meaning you are kind of planning in advance. And especially at the growth stage, you've got a market in the US, meaning a number of funds that can put money on your company that is not comparable to the number of funds you got in France or Europe, more globally speaking. And my statistics are not based on facts, but more the number of emails I received and the origins. And I would say there is a factor 7, 8, meaning for each email I get from a European growth funds, I probably get 7 or 8 for US growth funds. So I don't know the proper stat on the market, but I'm pretty sure that the US growth fund tends to like a lot US entities. And the reason is, that's a funny one, is because, well, Delaware corporate law and the fact that in the US you need to actually, well, you rely a lot on your lawyer, meaning you have a kind of a trust in the lawyers you use to set up the proper documentation and so on around the company in a way that is, I think, in my experience, it's closer than the kind of trust you build in Europe in a comparable setup. And, well, any lawyer you know, as a VC in the US, only know Delaware corporate law. So if you start investing in a French company, it's like you start actually you need to discover and trust another lawyer. And that's possibly something you never did in your life. So that's completely new. So yeah, well.
That's it, maybe to give some perspective on what it means to flip a company. I think people should just realize it's 3 to 5 months full-time work, actually. So it's not a marginal decision in the life of a company. It's Florian's time from 3 to 5 months.
Yes. No, not full-time, but no, it's like it's at this delay, it's a few €100K in terms of cost, and in terms of signing, I did put my initials and 6,000 pieces of paper, like really, physically, to do it. Just because in France, you know, we are a kind of a retarded country, so you need to sign physically corporate paper, and so if you've got like options, pools, and stuff like that, it gets very complicated.
Let's take the last one. What tool services did you find useful when you internationalized?
Oh. So employee relocation, that's a good one. Language, so localization, we actually didn't know localization whatsoever, which is funny because we only have one website in English, so no French version of the website, and no French version of the product and so on. So easy one. Employee relocation, I did not find a good provider to do that. And I think there is a market here, but if you want to build a startup, if you find a way to actually relocate visa, expat, cross-country employment, and so on, it's actually possibly a big market, both in the US and Europe, in fact. Well, in the US, not quite, but in Europe. Today, I've got employees in Netherlands, in Germany, well, in the UK, but I've got a proper entity, and it's a big mess.
Okay. So I think that was it. Thank you very much.